with the traffic calming, and you don't have to, wait at a stop sign for hours like I used to have to.
Yeah, I don't know why people complain about them. So
They're just different with the traffic calming, and you don't have to.
now, occasionally I will see someone coming the wrong way. That's a little worrisome.
Yeah. They like to get out in the other lane. Yeah.
That's why I tell everyone when we went to Australia and New Zealand, I practiced driving on the other side of the road here, so that I would be ready when I got there. Except it kind of scared a few people.
It did.
Including my wife.
Yeah, she backed out at the last minute. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's
so this was a house that you had looked at before. Oh no.
It'll be ready in 6 weeks.
Oh, so it's all dried in. I mean, So you get to pick the colors?
No, they were already selected. The only upgrade I could make was I chose a gas stove versus not a electric.
Much rather have a gas stove.
I haven't ever had one, but I do like them.
Oh yeah. So does it have gas hot water as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at like multiple screens.
Oh, that's okay. A gas dryer or not?
No.
Yeah, those are kind of painful to use. Is Mr. Roscoe going to be timely?
I think so.
I sure hope so.
It's
I sent you the Zoom link.
5:57.
I will send him an email. Oh, here he comes. I'm sorry, I do not see Mr. Councilmember Cortez.
I don't either. He'll pop in, I'm sure. Well, good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Good evening, Mr. Roscoe. It's a pleasure to have you. We'll start first, though, with Ms. Erdman.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Yeah, with us tonight is Mr. Roscoe. He's going to do the WCIA Council do's and don'ts as a training for us for the study session. So I will go ahead and turn it on over to him.
Thank you. Hope everybody's doing well this evening. Please, if you have any questions, especially when I'm sharing the screen, I may not be able to see if hands are raised or if someone's trying to get my attention. So please feel free to unmute and fire them away at me. I'm here to hopefully answer any questions or concerns you may have regarding liability exposures or WCIA in general. I do have a brief presentation to go over with you. So I will share my screen if I can do that. Can everybody see that? Sounds good. My name is Rob Roscoe. I'm the Deputy Director of Washington City's Insurance Authority. We are a municipal, an interlocal government agency created back in 1981. So I am a public employee. Any premiums we charge our members, we do not generate profit. That would go back towards services or future credit or subsidizing future rates if we possibly could. So again, we do not underwrite for a profit, and any excess premiums we generate or may have at the end of the year would go back to our members through services and additional trainings or risk management that we can provide for our members. We were created back in 1981 primarily because, believe it or not, municipal agencies or government in general are not a good insurance risk. And actually it's getting worse and worse each year, it seems like. Insurance is a very cyclical industry. Right now, especially in the liability side, we're seeing a very hard insurance market. We were created because of that, so I can't complain too much. This is why we exist, and this is the business I'm in. But we are very well funded. We have over $181 million in assets, and we have the strongest financials of any risk pool within the state of Washington. And we go all the way up to Sumas, down to Camas, Washougal, same thing from Longview over to Spokane Valley. So we are throughout the state of Washington. COVID definitely has some advantages in the fact that I can stay at home tonight and do these trainings. But I can be honest with you, I'd much rather be there in person because I find way more value in being able to talk to the individual councils and kind of feed off any questions or responses you may have for me. I'll do my best. I feel like I'm getting zoomed out and people may be zoomed out from me, but please, again, if you have any questions, feel free to fire them out at me. In general, WCA, we provide $20 million in insurance and liability coverage for the cities and for our members, ranging from auto liability, police, employment practices, general liability, your roads, your sidewalks, your streets, to errors and omissions. A nice thing about being in WCA is we look to find coverage for our members rather than if you ever had a large loss with an insurance company. I can honestly say the first thing they're going to try to do is look at that fine print and find ways to deny payment or find ways to exclude that coverage because no one wants to lose money and pay out. And another nice thing, a little bit of background. I've been in this industry for over 20 plus years now. I've worked for both WCA in the past. I'm back. This is my second term at WCA. I've worked for a municipality. I spent 13 years at a local municipality as a director, so I understand how municipalities work and local government works, and I can appreciate the struggles you have to go through. But the nice thing of being in WCA is we are one of 20, I'm one of 21 employees. Your city has direct contact to our executive director, Ann Bennett, who makes coverage decisions. For example, I worked for Safeco Insurance in the past. I was one of 2,000 employees, and I can honestly say no policyholder ever had Mike McGavick, the CEO at the time's direct phone number to talk about a claim handling issue. But that's the kind of service you get being with WCIA. We are a small, lean agency, but we provide a lot of coverage for our members. Everyone must be in our liability program, but we also provide property coverage, which is your property auto, as well as your auto first damage party losses and boiler or equipment breakdown coverage. Crime and fidelity is more your embezzlements or even your cyber attacks with phishing attacks, where someone may act as if there's someone else and look for money. I know I just read recently, I think it was the city of Tenino, just got hit for, I think it was $280,000 the state auditor found through a phishing scam scenario. Cyber is one of those markets that is increasingly hardening as well. Just to give you an example, I renewed cyber coverage last year, and I had to increase the members' deductibles. It used to be $25,000 per occurrence for a member for a cyber loss. That jumped to $50,000. And unfortunately, I had to reduce coverage where for ransomware events, that's where a hacker holds your system hostage and says, I will give you the cipher key to decrypt your data, but it's going to cost you. You used to have $1 million in coverage. I can't buy that anymore. I'm down to $100,000 in coverage. And it wasn't a matter of pricing. I would have paid the money for the additional $1 million in coverage. I just couldn't get it anymore. The markets wouldn't support it, and I couldn't purchase that coverage for our membership. It's that kind of a market right now. Same thing with when I renewed our liability. WCA insures the first $4 million itself. So WCA pays the first $4 million of any one loss. And then I buy what's called reinsurance. So I go out to traditional insurers to purchase excess insurance or reinsurance above that $4 million mark. And we really don't hit traditional insurance until about $11 million now, because we also belong to a pool of reinsurers too. But just to give you an example of the one layer that remained the same, and I have multiple layers and multiple carriers on my policy, was between the $15 and $20 million layer. Now, to date, we've never had to pay out a loss in that layer. So we're very fortunate in that regard. However, I had to renew with existing terms and conditions at a 65% increase in my premiums, despite never having a loss in that layer. That's just how crazy the insurance market is right now, especially in Washington State. We had 2 large reinsurers pull out of the state of Washington, saying that they would no longer underwrite any government businesses in the state because of the market conditions that we're faced with. But again, fortunately, that's why you're a member of a pool, and that's why we exist, is to provide that coverage for our members. And with that, you have claims services as well as risk management. You have a dedicated risk management representative to help staff with these issues as they come up and as they're dealing with day-to-day operations. So some of the things I want to talk to you about as a council. And again, it's important that you remember that you act as a council as a whole and not as individual council members, because there's some good immunities out there for government agencies for acting in that legislative capacity when your adoption of budgets, ordinances, and resolutions. When you're acting as a council as a whole, you have that legislative immunity. That immunity doesn't exist, though, when you step outside of that role and start acting as an individual. And that's when you can get into trouble. We used to see, back in the early 2000s to 90s, a lot more lawsuits and litigation naming individual council members. For the most part, we don't see a lot of that anymore. And that's very fortunate for you, because the last thing you ever want to do is have to be involved directly with depositions and being deposed by plaintiff attorneys, whose job is to try and find fault with something you may have said, done, or did as a council member. It's just not a good position to be in. In fact, we had one member. I remember this specifically because it used to be my city that I represented, where all the individual council members were being sued individually because we had a developer that wanted to develop their downtown waterfront area. And this developer had a lot of money. And unfortunately, the codes did not prohibit that type of development. So they pursued it and sued every individual council member. And the developer's plan was literally to wear down the council and to get them to change their codes. And I'd like to say it didn't work, but 10 years later, they changed their code to allow for that development. It was that egregious or onerous of a process. Now, we won the lawsuits and we got them dismissed. It just took a grind and a process to go through all that. And unfortunately, that sometimes is a card some people like to play, is to act through the courts. So it's important that you know your role as to whether or not you're acting as a legislative body or in a judicial capacity. Judicial capacity comes into more with land use decisions. And I know you guys use this hearing examiner, correct? Yeah, so you don't have a lot of involvement with that. And that is very beneficial for us because, again, when you act in a judicial capacity, you have to follow what's called the appearance of fairness doctrine, and you have to rule on matters that are entered into the record as evidence. And that's difficult to do, especially when you're out and about town or you have public comment, where you have people that start commenting outside of the record, which could impact your decision making, but isn't part of the record that you're supposed to rule upon. And it's hard to turn that off, especially when you're out at the checkout line and someone's bending your ear over some future development that they want to see or don't want to see, i.e. it could be a no growth situation. But again, you want to avoid acting in that arbitrary or capricious manner. In some cases that kind of highlight this exposure, WCI I had firsthand knowledge on was with Westmark versus the city of Burien. This was back when Burien first incorporated. And actually, Westmark was a development that was happening under King County zoning laws at the time, because that's what the process was. That's who they were vested in. But the city took it over once they incorporated. And lo and behold, we had a council member whose view was going to be blocked by said development. They did not want to see that development go through and basically found ways to delay said development and find ways to block it. Now, staff will say there were also issues with the developers' plans. They sometimes weren't submitted fully and they had to re-engineer and work with their plan development team to get it done properly. But regardless, all the developer could focus in on was the fact that this council member wanted their views and didn't want to see the development go through. So lo and behold, they bring a lawsuit for tortious interference with the business expectancy. Long story short, and $10 million later, we lost that case because it was found that the developers' rights were being violated because of the council members' delays in their rulings and finding and delaying that project and denying that developer their permits. Same thing with Mission Springs versus City of Spokane. In this situation, you had a mayor who didn't want to see this development go through, despite a city attorney cautioning the mayor, as well as a planning official, the building official, telling the mayor you had no basis to deny this permit. But the buck stopped with the mayor, and this mayor was not going to see this development through, so he denied it. And the developer sued, and the courts found that there's no legislative immunity when you're acting in that judicial capacity. Thus, they were liable under both state and federal law. Now, that's not to say you can't win, because you can. In Woodsview versus Kitsap County, the county ended up winning. There were delays, and as any developer will tell you, it's never their plans. It's always the bureaucracy of the government that they have to submit these plans through. But staff will tell you their plans, the developer wants them to engineer and design everything for them. So you always have a conflict with reviews and plans and meeting times and expectations. Here, the developer wanted it done quicker. There was a process, and they sued for delay. And unfortunately, fortunately for the county won, saying just because it was delayed doesn't mean there was any problems with the way the county acted. And you don't have that expectation of having things done overnight, and there is a reasonableness to their actions. And as long as it's based on code and they're following said code, you're going to be able to defend and defeat those claims. I also had a situation where I had a council member one time in open session say they no longer wanted to see any more senior affordable housing in downtown. The only problem with that is the code allowed for more development in downtown for senior affordable housing. So we had a development coming through and there were problems with the development, but because I had a council member make that statement in open session, the only thing the developer wanted to focus in on was that council member's conduct. So that ended up delaying and costing quite a bit of money in having to right a wrong based upon a perception of a council member made by comments in open session. So be very careful about the comments you make as well with your review process. Personnel, this is another very tenuous area, especially for council members, because personnel law, if anyone tells you they know everything about personnel law, it's impossible because it's so dynamic, and what's legal today may be illegal tomorrow, or what's illegal today may be legal tomorrow, all based upon case law. So these things get interpreted, they get passed by the legislature, and then they get interpreted through the courts. And the courts can change things overnight, especially in the Ninth Circuit, which is the federal district that we're in. So these were very large, and we have a lot of competing and different rules and regulations that come out. I will tell you, these laws are put in place to protect employees. They're not put in place to protect employers or the municipality. So these laws are designed to protect your employees, and you don't want to stray into the executive role. You have a city manager, respect the city manager's function, and allow them to deal with those personnel issues as they arise. And it's something that it's important to note, your intent is irrelevant when it comes to creating a potential hostile work environment for staff and employees. It's how it's being perceived by them. I had one situation where I had a mayor at another city had a predominantly female staff, and he kept referring to his staff as his girls. And he was told by numerous employees to please stop, refer them to as his employees, but stay away from the gender-based term. Well, he said, but Rob, I'm not meaning it offensively. They're just my female employees. I said, well, you can refer to them as female employees, but the term girls kind of can be diminishing or belittling at some point, and they don't appreciate that. So please don't refer to them in that manner. And he stopped. So the issue resolved itself because he recognized that role. But again, his intent wasn't trying to be demeaning. He just was unfamiliar with that being a derogatory or unprofessional term. So again, once you're asked to please stop or refrain from that conduct, the best thing you could do is not argue about it being offensive or unoffensive and just stop that behavior. Because again, it could lead to problems down the road. And you can and might quite possibly could be sued individually. So you do want to know your policies. You want to know who you should report violations to, especially if you ever have staff. Sometimes you may be in a situation where staff may talk to you about some inappropriate conduct or behavior going on. Well, if they reported that to you, you now have knowledge about that. So you want to make sure you pass that on depending upon how your policies are worded, but usually involve your either city manager or city attorney or HR director to make sure they're aware of that behavior so that they can conduct a proper investigation and hopefully prevent any future occurrences from going on. So again, you do want to report any behavior and model that behavior as well, and be aware of what your policies state, because you're held to those same standards. And that can be a tough role sometimes for staff. I'm a former HR director, risk manager at a municipality. I had a situation one time where I had to counsel an elected official. Normally with staff, we have recourse. I can discipline staff. I can take action to effectuate a change. With elected officials, I can't necessarily discipline an elected official. You're elected by the people, and I can't terminate your term of office. So it puts us in a very difficult situation where I still have to make sure I stop that behavior from recurring, because that employee could have a potential cause of action against the municipality if you don't stop that behavior. So it's very important that you're aware of those situations. And actually, that situation, I ended up at a council member and a mayor that didn't necessarily see eye to eye. And council member ended up running against the mayor. I had to counsel this council member about conversations she was having in front of staff. And I ended up being sued individually, along with the mayor at the time. I got the case dismissed because I was acting in my role as a HR official and advising the council member to refrain from that behavior, but council member took offense by that and somehow felt like they had a cause of action against me. Just be aware, though, that these things can happen and they can exist, but if you're dealing with staff, appreciate the role they're in. You are an elected official. They feel like you have influence and can impact their jobs, so you don't want to put them in that situation if you can avoid it. Negligent misrepresentation is also an issue. You are the city of Battleground. Your words carry weight. You do not want to make specific promises or assurances to the public, to staff, to basically anyone, because those promises or assurances could be relied upon them, maybe to their own detriment. Give you an example of that. We had one municipality with some pretty strict downtown codes, and you had a business that wanted to reside their business, went to the mayor and said, "Hey, mayor, I'm thinking about residing my store. Any problems or concerns with that?" "No, Joe, go ahead." So Joe begins to reside his business. Code enforcement comes by and puts on a stop work order. Notice in red tags his construction. Joe comes in, complains, files a claim for damages because now he's incurred additional costs, had to close down his business, all because code enforcement red tagged the building. Well, red tag was appropriate because it violated the downtown code. Unfortunately, when I got the claim for damages, the business owner is saying, "Well, I relied upon what the mayor told me and saying I could cite it with this citing." So I talked to the mayor. "Mayor, did you tell Joe he could read?" "Well, I did, Rob. I didn't understand that violated our code at the time." "Well, you think I had a problem with that claim and lawsuit?" "Yeah, well, it didn't turn into a lawsuit because I paid the claim." That's something that we couldn't defend because that business owner relied upon a statement from the mayor at the time. So you don't want to take business or those matters into your own hand either. Don't be afraid to refer people to staff, especially if it involves codes, regulations that you may not be familiar with. It's okay to say, "Let me get back to you," and you can always check back with the relevant department as well and get back to those individuals. But again, by making those assurances, they can then rely upon that could lead to a claim for damages that we may have to pay out on. Defamation is another potential area of concern, obviously. Truth is always a defense to that. But again, you want to be careful. You don't refer to individuals when you're dealing with code enforcement actions. Property addresses are always relevant, but when you start naming names, people get offended by that. Whether it's true or not could be a defense, but it could also lead to potential litigation and claims that you were defaming them publicly. So be very careful about that and your conduct. And if you're ever unsure about that, I would always try to steer you to your city attorney for further guidance regarding what's appropriate or inappropriate regarding that. I know the city of Seattle is struggling with this right now with Council Member Kasama Sawant and litigation revolving around issues made to police officers. So that's still being litigated in the courts. At one point it was dismissed and now it got brought back in. So again, it's one of those things that is a evolving area of the law. Public works, this is near and dear to my heart. Outside of police, This is one of the biggest exposures municipalities face, especially with roads and political engineering. Political engineering is what I call, it sounds good, or the neighborhood wants it, so let's do it. But it may not meet traffic warrants or have engineering justification for whatever control the neighborhood wants in place. It could be speed bumps, it could be stop signs, it could be crosswalks. It's one of those areas that's very ripe for litigation, because in Washington State, we have a form of liability called joint and several. Joint and several means that if you're at least 1% at fault and the individual that was damaged is fault-free, they can collect the entire judgment from any at-fault party. So this happens a lot with road design situation or crosswalks, where you have a passenger in a vehicle who's not driving the vehicle, or a pedestrian who is struck by another vehicle who's basically fault-free. So now all they have to do is find the city at least 1% at fault, and they can collect the entire judgment from the city. Now, I would love to be able to argue to a jury, look, if you find the city at least 1% at fault, they could be paying the entire $8 million worth of damages you're going to award the drunk driver who just hit Sally in that crosswalk. Unfortunately, I can't argue that to a jury because that would be inflammatory and prejudicial to the jury and their decision-making process. So the jury doesn't even get to hear that while they're deliberating on these cases. So a clever plaintiff attorney is going to try to find some kind of fault with why you placed that crosswalk there, or the lighting, or the speed. And if you don't have the engineering warrants to fall back on to defend, it's going to make our job a lot harder to defend you in any subsequent claim for damages or lawsuit. So that's why it's so important that you let your traffic engineer engineer those roads and not involve counsel in setting speed zones or placing stop signs or traffic control devices of any type. Now, you can do so through the budgetary process and allocate things according to the budget, but if something's merited or warranted through the engineering process, let the engineer engineer those roads. Now, you'll get a lot of political pressure sometimes from neighborhoods. Be very careful about, well, Rob, how many people have to die before we make this road safe in open session? You're now putting your opinion on that road being unsafe, and you don't want to turn yourself into exhibit or witness A for the plaintiff as to why that road is safe and it meets those traffic engineering design standards at the time it was constructed. So again, safety is kind of an opinion, and you don't want to say it's unsafe in open session because, again, it very well could be safe, and that's just an opinion that a council member or an elected official may have, or an engineer may have something contrary to that. So this is one of those areas that you just can't win. And I will tell you, a funny story we had is, I was at a class one time, continuing education. I had a mayor at another local jurisdiction say, well, Rob, I remember one time I had 20 people come into my office saying they wanted a stop sign up because traffic was a problem there. So we put a stop sign up. Next meeting, I had 200 people complaining about the stop sign I put up. Again, it's one of those things that sometimes have implications and ramifications that go beyond just what you think may be good for that neighborhood. So be very careful about that. And joint and several liability, it's one of those issues that we're constantly battling with the legislature on. We'd love to see some tort reform come into play, except we're pounding our heads against the wall, and it really has a deaf ear. It's one of those things that's really entrenched. We are about one of, I think, 7 states still in the nation that have some form of joint and several liability, and I just don't see it going anywhere. The legislature in Washington's pretty strong with the idea of if you're innocent, you should be able to collect from any at-fault party. So while it's just the unfair way of allocating it, it's just something we have to live with and be aware of it, because it definitely impacts municipalities and governments and how you conduct business and the decisions that you make. Executive session. Executive session is a great tool for you. It's a great format for you to have frank discussions when you're dealing with real estate transactions, dealing with personnel issues, claims and litigation. However, you cannot discuss what is said in executive session to your spouse, your significant other, at cocktail hour, because that can severely jeopardize our ability to defend and potentially even waive attorney-client information. So be very careful about that and resist the temptation to share what is said during exec sessions. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've had councils that had to censure other council members because of leaks to the press, where you have infighting within council members and they can't agree on certain issues and they're disclosing what is said during exec session. And that really can be a cancer to your organization. So be very careful about that. And again, it will jeopardize our ability to defend you in potential litigation and waive certain actions. Also, you have got to be very mindful of communication. This is an area that is very ripe for disclosure and fines and penalties, which is something that is not necessarily covered by WCIA. I live in the world of torts and civil litigation, public records, which really falls into this arena, are fines and penalties. So you got to be careful. Basically, everything you potentially do on behalf of Battleground, if you're furthering their interests and working for the city, is potential public record. So you don't want to necessarily be working on your own cell phone or your own computer, because that could potentially be discoverable or be subject to a Public Records Act request and search. Sometimes they have to get into what's called metadata and make sure that it's original content. So it can be very complex. So I caution you about that and about the use of your personal tools and communication devices, because those could be subject to a Public Records Act request and discoverable in potential litigation. So you don't want to use or conduct personal or city business on your personal equipment. You should always use city issued cell phones or computers or iPads if issued. And be very mindful as well about emails, especially as a legislative body, because it's real easy to have or conduct what's called a serial meeting or an email where you're looking for direction on a certain issue and you're gauging how people may vote. Well, that could potentially violate the Open Public Meetings Act. I would again encourage you to talk to your city attorney regarding that, because that's not something that we necessarily delve into. It's something that I've seen and experienced firsthand, because it's easy to do, where you forward an email or you respond to all to an email chain. And by responding to all, you may be violating that act. So be very careful and cognizant of those situations. Any questions for me? I've talked for the last half hour over different issues. Any concerns you guys may have, either with liability or WCA with the insurance being provided for the city?
Mr. Roscoe, if you'll kind of drop your presentation so we can kind of see each other.
Certainly, you bet. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Roscoe? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Walters.
So I brought up something a couple meetings ago about a possible traffic issue on one of the streets. And the question was asked to speak with the engineer to see if anything could be done at that intersection. Would that be putting us at a liability?
No, that's okay. That happens all the time. And
Okay.
you have discretion too, because sometimes decisions will be made in the budget as to whether or not you install certain things, and your role is to act through the budgetary process. But let the engineer review, and you can certainly bring issues of attention to them. But I would be careful not to preface it with it being dangerous or unsafe. You don't want to refer to it using the terms dangerous or unsafe, because those are opinions. And that's then something that has to be refuted if it ever leads to a claim for damages or you're involved in litigation.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Bowman, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Roscoe. The question that I have is, if you have a council member that is anti-development or anti-developer, okay,
Sure.
and has made that statement multiple times about developers or developers agreements or any of that kind of stuff, and you have a situation where, let's say it's a 4-3 vote, and the prevailing side includes that council member. Could the other 3 be open to liability or exposure there because the developer goes after this one council member because they've always said, we don't like developers, we don't like developers agreements, whatever it may be?
I hate development agreements. I hate them because I've experienced too many changes where what happens with one council binds future councils 10 years later, and they forget why things were put in place. It's just my own firsthand experience dealing with that. But in your scenario itself, not necessarily. I mean, you have a hearings examiner, they're acting in that judicial capacity. Development agreements go outside the realm of your traditional code, and you're trying to do this for that. And you're getting a little bit more wonky sometimes with certain codes where you're taking this for that, but then, like I said, 10 years later, you forget that this for that, and people start changing the rules on them. And certain councils then don't want to adhere to that development agreement that now is the term. And you can't violate that, because if you now violate that, you're subject to potentially violation of a contract. So it's not necessarily a tort as much as it is a breach of a contract claim that could be a problem. But just being anti-development, that happens all the time. And with a hearing examiner, I say you can at least have opinions now regarding that. If you didn't have a hearings examiner and you're ruling on it, that's where you really see those conflicts come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just got a question about, you mentioned the city up north and said they were having some troubles. I'm just curious, has your organization ever kicked a city out for maybe having too many claims?
Well, that's a great
Are you
point.
managing our risks, sir?
a lot of cities I'd like to kick out.
So you can't.
I say that tongue, we can actually, but we don't. Normally, what will get you kicked out of the pool is not following the advice or cooperation, i.e. losses happen. We get that. We work with our members regarding that. But if you have a city that's basically disregarding the advice, not even advice, but not cooperating with our litigation and going outside of what we're saying you need to do, because when we get into claims and lawsuits, you do turn that right over to us to manage that litigation because it's our dollars now. But if you're then going contrary to our litigation management, that's where we can kind of get into a situation that we may say, this may not be the right fit for you. You may want to go somewhere else. Have we ever kicked anyone out? Not necessarily kicked out, but we have agreed to part terms with a municipality before where they've left, and we were glad to see them go scenario. But we don't just kick members out based upon losses, because we feel very strongly about risk management. We want to educate and try to train our members and put best practices in place. And that's why we're here. We're here because technically the insurance industry doesn't necessarily want you So we will take you, but you're going to pay, and what you pay annually is impacted by your losses. So we are a risk pool, but your losses will impact your annual assessment that you pay WCIA each year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one. Mr. Roscoe, I do have a few questions, just kind of off the wall
Sure.
kind of things. The largest city that you guys cover?
Oh boy, that is changing. We have, let's see, population wise, I don't know. We have Kirkland, Olympia, the Tri-Cities. We have both Kennewick, Richland, and Pasco. So we have some pretty large cities.
So somewhere around the 100,000 is.
Oh
like
yeah, definitely over 100,000 in
So
population.
Vancouver, obviously you don't work with.
I got calls regarding Vancouver. They're pretty large, but we did not quote them. I actually had Spokane wanting to join too, and we said we refused.
Oh boy. And then the smallest city you work with?
Oh boy, we have North Bonneville. That's one of the
okay.
smallest. Yeah, we have pretty small cities.
Are you backed by the legislature? If it got worst case?
No, we are not funded or backed through the state. We do not insure any state or county agencies either. We only insure municipalities or municipal agencies. So fire authorities, water, sewer, operating districts, 911 dispatch centers. You have to have a municipal function or serve a municipal function to be a member, but we are not backed by the legislature. Now, I will say we are very well funded. We are funded over 90% confidence level, and we want to maintain that. I will say, though, the last 5 years have been extremely difficult for us.
I can imagine. And then as far as we are, the city, are we a full menu? I mean,
you are.
I call it homeowners. I assume you cover our, the everything from stem to stern.
We do. We do your property, your auto, physical damage. You have crime and fidelity through us. So yes, we do provide a lot of coverages for you. Cyber and pollution are also part of our liability program that we provide to our members as part of your liability assessment to us.
And then my final question would be for the 6 of us who are here this evening, would you recommend an umbrella policy for us?
What do you mean? For an individual?
As an individual, yes.
Well, not as a council member, because you got pretty good protection through WCA. You have $20 million of liability coverage with us per occurrence for your membership. And we cover the city, specifically in our coverage document, it's the city, the employees, and elected officials. So you are protected individually in our policy, as long as you're acting within the course and scope of your duties as an elected official. We don't cover you for your individual acts outside of your role as an elected official. So if you were to be sued individually for something you did at home or not in the course or conduct as an elected official, you wouldn't have coverage through us.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. But before we call it an evening, is there anyone else? Did anything come to anyone while someone else was speaking? Seeing none, Mr. Roscoe, again, as always, we'll see you in 2 years.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and especially your service as an elected official. I know how onerous that can be. My sister-in-law is the mayor of Fife. And again, I used to have to go to city council meetings every other Monday. So I definitely know what that entails. So thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Erdman, is there anything you'd like to add before we call it a day here and move on?
Nope, we don't have anything else for the study session.
Thank you. The time is 6:40. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Walters.
Sorry, we don't have a link yet for the executive session that's coming up. So
we're going to try things a little bit different. We're going to do it in a breakout room, so you guys won't have to come in and out. We'll just send you to the breakout room. So
all right, thanks.
I think they did that for me, kind of for it's an ageist thing, I believe, is what that is. But
I'm just trying to make your life easier. That's all.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
That's right. That's our tagline.
It's 6:44. We'll see everyone
you.
right at, goodbye, sir. We'll see you at 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. 7 o'clock. Welcome to the 18 January Battleground City Council meeting. If you'll mute your microphone and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I apologize there. I got caught up. Ms. Kammer, if you'll please call the roll.
Certainly. Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Mayor DeRochers,
Here.
Councilmember Walter,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
and Cortez.
Here.
Wonderful. I hope everyone's well this evening. There's a couple of changes to the agenda. We'll start with the first one. We're going to need to amend the agenda. So let me go ahead and make the motion. I move to amend tonight's agenda to add the presentation of Executive Order 2022-01 regarding the city manager's action to cancel the in-person component for tonight's study session and city council meeting to the mayor's report, along with a presentation and motion to adopt resolution number 22-01 ratifying that order. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll consider it unanimous. Moving on to the next motion, and that is I move to amend tonight's agenda to add discussion regarding the declared civil emergency resolution to address possible changes to the current format provided for both study session and city council meetings. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll consider it unanimous. And the final one. I move to amend tonight's agenda to remove the city manager's salary increase state business item. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you very much. We'll now move to the council member reports. Are there any? I have to take my glasses off to see. They're reading glasses. I don't see anyone. Am I missing anyone? I don't think so. Wonderful. We'll then move on to the mayor's report, and we'll start with the resolution 22-01 as presented. As you know, a bit of the sickness has hit the city, so we had to move to the Zoom meeting this evening. When we had said in the past that we were moving to in-person meetings. So let me think of it. Ms. Erdman, was there anything more to that?
No, so what I issued an executive order today to suspend the in-person meeting. I have that authority based on our existing emergency declaration. So what you have in front of you is resolution 2022-01, just ratifying that emergency order. So that would need to be adopted this evening. And then I think we wanted to just open it up for further conversation if we wanted to amend that existing emergency declaration to allow for some flexibility of this issue if it were to occur in the future.
Wonderful. So I'll make the motion to adopt resolution 22-01, ratifying this executive order as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Now, as for the discussion, there are a couple of things, and Ms. Erdman, did everyone get kind of the outline?
No, that just went to you on the mayor's agenda.
Okay, fine. Let me kind of add kind of the options that the city is thinking of. The first one would be that all study sessions and city council meetings shall be held virtually only until, and we'll pick a date if that's so. After that date, the in-person component automatically resumes. The second one would be section 4, which was the authorization to grant the authority to the city manager with consent of the mayor to declare that the in-person component for any given meeting may be suspended as necessary to manage the ongoing health emergency created by COVID-19, which is what we did this evening. And then the other would be that there would be no change at all, and that the in-person component continues after this evening, would start back on February 7th, I believe is the next meeting.
That's correct.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be in favor of the first one, but with a small caveat. I think we should definitely put a date in there, not that we will start, immediately at this time, because we have to see what the conditions are. But frankly, myself, and I'm seeing it, firsthand from schools. I mean, my classroom has about 55-60% students that are gone. My daughter just tested positive today, so that's why I had to stay home.
Oh,
And
my.
so, yeah, it's almost as certain that schools are going to face some form of a shutdown, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever that may be. And so I think it would be prudent for us to probably be virtual for the next, 3 to 4 months, and then reevaluate it based upon conditions at that time. So thank you
sir.
very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just so that we can kind of keep an idea. Number 1, of course, is going to virtual. Number 2 is kind of a hybrid, if you will, that if something like this happens again on February 21st, then Ms. Erdman would make the call. I would either agree or disagree with her, and we would go back to virtual, but then the first meeting in March would be held back in person if things were to roll out. And the third one is that we continue just to meet in person, full steam ahead. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Rogers.
So I'm fine with us planning to be in person, and then, if we need to go virtual, going virtual.
So
So,
that would be number 2.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Walters.
I'm also in favor of number 2. I hate the idea of just jerking back and forth and how we're having to shut completely down and then we're going to be opening completely up. I really just don't want to confuse people. So I would like to continue to have an in-person component if possible. I realize this week it wasn't possible, but I do want to have that in-person component as an option.
So number 2.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Bowman.
I prefer number 1 just from the standpoint of from meeting to meeting, exactly where we're at, and people who are listening or coming know exactly where they're at. So it's not like tonight, all of a sudden we go virtual and people may have been wanting to be there or not. So I prefer option number 1 and just reassess as we, the health department or whatever says, because this news strain that's going around, I have it right now, and would have never known that I had this strain of COVID. I would have thought it was a cold, and I would have been sitting next to you guys tonight had I not just decided to go take a test over the counter. So I think that just going to the virtual for now, and then reassessing, maybe mid-March or end of March, see where we're at, or when the health department says, hey, go back to meetings, that's where I think we should be. Then it's consistent.
So far we're rolling 2 for 1 and 2 for 2. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Davis.
I choose for the second one. To shut down hard again, I think is not the way that I think it should go. People have learned to be flexible. We have the Zoom possible that we all flipped to for tonight. It wasn't the best, but it worked. We still have school board meetings that are meeting as of right now. So I think we should be a little bit more flexible and not shut it down hard for a month or so and do it as needed. That's just my thought.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, that leaves me and Mr. McCoy. Yes, sir. I see you now. I'm sorry. I'm kind of moving through the screens.
That's all right. I'm pretty hard to offend. The only issue I have with picking a date is the one thing COVID's taught me is to never guess what COVID's going to do. That's about the only lesson I've learned from this whole thing. So while I like the idea of picking a date, I would rather us be flexible and just picking a hard date, say we're going to come back March 15th. I would rather we just assess it every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or something, and then make the determination that, okay, we're good, we can go in person the following meeting. So kind of a hybrid of 1 and 2, to be honest.
Well, we'll put you down at 1 3/4.
I just don't like to have that date too far out. I think March is too far, so that's what I'm trying to say.
I understand. Yes, sir. Well, no, I don't. So you can't be 1 3/4. You're either 1 or you're a 2.
Well, I'd like us to be virtual until we have enough people back in the city to have it in person.
So you're a 1. Thank you.
I'd like.
Ms. Urban and I spoke at great length about this today, and it was a tough decision because I want to meet in person. I feel that we do better in person, and in my estimation, I think we seem to get more done. The Zoom seems to kind of zoom us out, I guess would be the term. So I'm going to go with number 2, which pretty much puts us at 4-3, Ms. Erdman, if my math is correct. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what we'll do on come the next meeting, February 7th, Ms. Erdman and I will discuss it. We will get it out as soon as possible. If you don't hear from us, we'll see you at City Hall. Is that fair, Ms. Erdman?
That is, we definitely will need to make a motion to amend the existing emergency declaration to add that language. So
Yes.
I'll actually let Ms. Hayes jump in with that motion for you guys if you would like.
Ms. Hayes, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Council. So what we can do is make a motion to amend the emergency declaration section 4 to grant the city manager, upon consent of the mayor, the authority to suspend the in-person component to study sessions and city council meetings by noon on the day of said meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you. Did everyone get that?
Mr. Mayor, so the question I have on that
Yes, sir.
is who's making the call, the city manager or the mayor?
The city manager is making the call with the consent of the mayor.
So if the city manager says one thing and the mayor disagrees, how does that go?
We're going to
Or
arm
if the
wrestle.
mayor says one thing and the city manager disagrees, how does that go?
So the way that motion was phrased, the ultimate authority would lie with the mayor. So it would be the recommendation of the city manager, but the mayor would have the authority, since this is your guys' meeting, an executive order to agree or disagree. The practical potential issue there that came up today is simply if we don't have the available staff that can actually work the in-person component. I'm hopeful that our mayor, as he did tonight, would hopefully understand that there's truly an inability to turn it on. That's kind of where we're at. But
Is there?
Yes, sir.
Is there a way? I mean, I'm not saying I don't like the way it was done today, but because we fall within the guidelines of what we can do. But is there a way to give us more leeway? Are we making the call on Monday morning when we see who shows up for work? Or are we making the call on Friday afternoon because cases are still through the roof? We've got employees out. When are we making that call?
So the way that motion was phrased, and council is free to amend it, because I'll be quite honest, I just made that up on the spot here, is that the have to be made by Monday at noon. You can caveat that at any time you want. Where that example came from is, for example, today, we learned literally this morning at about 9 a.m. of the staffing shortage. So this call could not have been made earlier than it was, because the staffing issue literally arose, I think it was a little before 9 a.m.
Mhm.
We learned of another exposure.
Yeah. And I think my goal would be to make these interpretations as soon as possible. Like if we know we have staff that are on extended leave, we'll definitely make that call sooner. But as Ms. Hayes stated today, it didn't happen until 8:30, 9 o'clock that we knew this was an issue. So.
Because that's the only concern I have is the timing. Because if you get your agenda, you know, and we send out council packets to many people throughout the community, and I know tonight we don't have a lot on the agenda, but let's say there's something that you would like to go comment on the agenda, and we're the only council that is meeting, and you think you're going to go down there, and you get an email at noon, 2 o'clock, maybe, that it's changed. And if you don't read it, you're showing up to City Hall and we're in person or we're not in person. So is there a way for us to know that I know there's no way for us to know like today what happens, right? But I would rather it be sooner than Monday at noon, personally, that we're letting people know, hey, there's no meeting tonight.
Would Monday at 9 o'clock work for you?
I'm fine. The earlier the better. Monday or Friday or whatever it may be. Now that could change over the weekend, but the earlier the better if we're going to go this route.
That's the potential issue that Ms. Erdman and I discussed, is so many exposures happen over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we're not seeing, at least right now, a lot of on-the-job exposures. We're seeing weekend exposures. So that's the potential issue in frankly, just in going this route, is we have the flexibility, but the timing and getting the word out is not ideal. I don't know the way around that. I guess I kind of go back to the practicality of well, frankly, it's not up to me. This is up to you, but I understand and agree the idea that you'd want to have it sooner than later. But if we find out at 1 o'clock on Monday that the 3 staff members that know how to operate the Zoom, what do we do?
Yeah, no, I get that. I just, if we can, as soon as possible,
For sure.
let people know, because that could be, I know we want to be back in person, but you show up for a meeting and they're not in person, and we'll take just as much heat.
Yes, that would be very irritating.
Yeah. And we want to know sooner than later too. Like tonight, we have to postpone the oath of office for our new officer because that's an in-person item. So, we're setting the agenda based on whether we're going to be in person or virtual as well. So we want to know these things as soon as possible.
Thank you.
And then anyone else? You'll forgive me, I'm scanning as quickly as I can.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Again, 2 quick things. One is the hybrid component of council members still being able to attend virtually, even though we're in person. Is that still available? We're not doing away with that, correct?
Struck in stone.
Okay. And then secondly, I think this discussion that we just had just a few seconds ago, I think it points to how we need some form of, I know we all want to meet in person, myself included, but I think we need to put some form of reliability or something that people can count on, that, hey, for the next 30 days, they're going to be meeting virtually. And then after that, they're going to go back to in person, because this trying to figure out, Monday at 9 a.m. or Monday at noon or whatever that may be. I mean, that is just impossible. We're going to upset more people than we are going to try to, just for us to meet in person. And so I think I'd like to ask my colleagues to reconsider going that route. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let me ask you this, sir. If for, let's just say on February 7th, we do this again, and then we have one of us or 2 of us show up in person, the other 5 of us in Zoom, however that may work, along with Ms. Erdman or whatever, they're in person, would that be suitable for you?
I mean, again, it's more of just, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but again, the end goal is for all of us to be there, right?
Amen.
And so I think, I definitely do think we need to provide some form of surety to both us as colleagues, as well as staff and the public, that, hey, this is what we're going to be doing for the next 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, whatever time period that may be. And then after that, we're going to be going back to in person. And so people out in the community will know that if they want to attend a meeting, if they want to submit public comments, they're going to have to do it virtually. And after this date, then they'll get to go back in person. Because again, under your recommendation or your scenario, if people go to a council meeting and there's only 2 council members, but everybody else is virtual, maybe they wanted to interact with some council members that were, not theirs. And so,
Certainly. Thank you. Any other discussion before we move forward with the motion? You'll have to say something if you do, because I can't.
Yeah,
I
I
yes,
do.
ma'am, Mr. Rogers.
Here. So I just wanted to say that the consistency we can offer is that it will always be available on Zoom or YouTube. So we'll always be virtual whether we're in person or not. That we have that component that's consistent for the public, is that it will be viewable online.
Now, let me back that up, if I may, before I get to you, Mr. Bowman. Will the Zoom address, Ms. Erdman, Ms. Kammer, always be available, as well as the YouTube address along the line?
Yes, that is the plan. We will always maintain the hybrid approach. So we'll have the Zoom option and it will live stream to YouTube moving forward.
Okay, so there will be both. Yes, sir, Mr. Bowman. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
So, Mr. Rogers, that only applies to people that want to watch, not people that want to speak. So in the last meeting, when I Zoomed in, I had a person from the community ask why we didn't send out the Zoom link. And it's because we had YouTube, you can watch YouTube, but if they wanted to speak, they had to get a hold of the city to be able to speak. And that was an in-person meeting. So you could speak over Zoom. If you contact the city first to speak, then they would send you the Zoom link so that you could speak, versus going down to City Hall to speak. And so that's the way it was the last meeting. I don't know if we're changing that, Ms. Erdman, and allowing anybody to speak, whether they're in person or they're on virtual.
Yeah, and that's totally up to you guys. We tried to do it that way so that we didn't have a ton of faces on the Zoom screen if they were not there to participate, because it's going to get a little bit harder as we do this hybrid model to manage both. We can definitely change that and provide the Zoom link on the website. Our thought process was if they weren't going to speak, they could watch it on YouTube, and then we didn't have to manage the Zoom screen and the in-person component as well. But we can definitely do both.
Why don't we do that, Ms. Erdman, for the month of February? And then we'll figure it out from there, and we can move forward for eternity. Or at least a couple of years, whatever comes first.
I'd really recommend not putting a Zoom link out there that's available for anybody to grab and share their screen. So be careful with that.
Well, but that's what we've always done, Mr. McCoy, over the past year. Everyone's had access to that link. Is that not right, Ms. Erdman?
That is correct.
Just from shared experience.
I understand there's a bit of risk there with hooligans and such, but that's what we've done in the past. Anyone else? If so, please speak up. I may not be able to see you. So the motion was that, and Ms. Hayes, if we move instead of noon, if you can repeat that, let's try 9 a.m.
Section 4 of the emergency declaration shall be amended to grant authority to the city manager upon confirmation of the mayor to suspend the in-person component to the study session and city council meeting no later than 9 a.m. on the day of the meeting.
I believe that covers it.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Why don't we, Ms. Kammer, why don't we do a roll call on that, if you will?
Who made the original motion?
I did.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Walters,
Yes.
Bowman,
No.
Cortez,
No.
Davis,
Yes.
DeRochers,
Yes.
McCoy.
No.
I believe that's 4-3. Motion carries. Moving on. Well, yes, I think isn't that it, Ms. Erdman, for that?
That is correct. Yes.
Yes. Moving on. 2 weeks ago, at the end of the last meeting, we talked about trying to set up a series of accomplishments that, or not accomplishments, kind of things that you would like to see done over the next 2 years. And we were going to make a concerted effort as a council to start whittling away at those goals. So I'm going to take just a few minutes here. And again, if I don't see you, raise your hand or whatever, please just pipe up. And if you've thought about that and you have some, the city, I understand Ms. Erdman may have a goal or two, is correct? Is that right? Do you have any goals for us from the city's perspective?
We actually have a department head retreat scheduled for the 28th, where we will be updating our strategic action plan and going through goals, and we will share the results of that after we get done with that retreat.
So that'll be in February.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So at that point, I open the floor. Yes, sir, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Not that I don't have anything specifically that I want to have done except continue to pay off debt. But I would ask, as council does this, if you have something that you want done, can you also let us know? This goes back to the visioning process. When we had the visioning process and people wanted parks, how do you propose that we pay for it? So if you want something done, what are you thinking? Pot of money or TBD, or what that would look like in your mind if you have something that you would want done? That's all I would ask for.
But you're not going to hold anyone to it.
No, because I mean, if you can't,
If-
I mean, you can ask for $1 million, but if you can't find the $1 million, no.
Well, we would just have you write us a check.
Yeah, no. So.
Oh, okay. Moving forward then. Anyone, please.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cortez, I see you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had this discussion in the past on this issue that I want to bring up. One of the emphasis I'd like for our council to be really focused on over the next 2 years is going to be on how do we really start to make significant, actually I shouldn't say significant, how do we continue to make more progress on our transportation infrastructure, our roads. And to that extent, I would like to propose that we take the approach that we took with our fire annexation, which our fire annexation was very, very comprehensive, very transparent with the community, staff, including staff involving Aaron at the head of that, really just went all out when it came to our annexation process. And in the end result was that the voters approved it by just about 81%, which is unheard of in the past 25, 30 years of local government. And so what I'd like for us to do is really explore putting together a transportation benefit district that involves a sales tax component. And so that will help the people that come and visit our community, but don't necessarily live in our community, whenever they shop here, to be able to pay a little portion of that towards our roads and infrastructure. And as everybody knows here on council, when you create a transportation benefit district, the monies that it raises cannot be redirected or reutilized on anything else other than transportation infrastructure. And so I think it's fiscally prudent and fiscally smart. And so I'd like to see us make some progress on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Some years ago, Ms. Gilberti had a slogan, share the road, share the load. So maybe I have you down as TBD then, in a very simple manner. Mr. McCoy, I saw you next, sir.
Yeah, got a couple of things. I've probably talked to most of you individually before I was on council, but living off Southwest 20th, I'd really like the city to look at expanding sidewalk, pedestrian path, or any other type of path on one of our main arteries. There's not even a shoulder on it, and it's a C-Tran bus route. So pretty big buses going down with no shoulder. I know the city looked at it in 2020, and Mr. Hersig was nice enough to email me that that was well over 500,000 back then. But there is, he also shared with me the pedestrian bike grant that's due in July. So I would just like some input maybe from the city of what are our odds of getting something like that. And if not, then we can check Council Member Bowman's box and figure out how else we would pay for it.
Mr. Hersig, I see you're here. If it was 500,000 2 years ago, well, actually, year and some change ago, what would you? Not going to hold you to it. What would you estimate it?
I would put us at 3/4. And to
Wow, up half.
it depends. So there's kind of a couple of things we have to look at. What side of the road we pick? Do we extend the sidewalk that kind of exists on the west side? Or do we do more of a shared use path, which would go on the east side? So that's going to affect the price. So we'd want to kind of decide that. I think honestly, either way, that ped bike grant is a good option. You'll see it coming up, I believe, in February, but we've been working on a local road safety plan, which makes us eligible for a bunch of state grants, that being one of them. And so it's going to be fairly high on that list and that plan. And I think it fits very well with that program. There's a lot of people that apply for it, so it's very much not a sure thing, but I think we have a halfway decent shot at it. So I think it's a good idea.
Mr. McCoy, do you have any questions of Mr. Hersig?
No, I look forward to seeing that plan. And then I just have one more thing. There's a lot of community support for a dog park in town. I know talked to somebody this morning about it, and I believe it was Mayor Johnson and I had a conversation this morning about it. We can share that he maybe had some properties in mind that it might work on. So I'd love to hear. You've obviously put more thought into it than I have.
Well, over the years, I've talked to various folks, the previous city manager. I don't know if Ms. Urban and I have talked over a whole lot, but at some point, going and talking to the Furstenbergs who own the property next to the fire station and the police department. It's been for sale now for years, going on roughly, I believe, 7. And at some point to see if perhaps we can set up we'll call it a temporary, up until the time they sell the property, and use it. Plenty of parking, as far as parking goes, wouldn't bother anyone as far as I can see. The thing, of course, would be just like in any of our parks, the idea of self-policing. That if you refuse to follow the general rules of dog parks, then at some point the city would just say we're out of the dog park business. Also, I've thought about, and the city, of course, some time ago when we did the fire annexation, gave the property behind Albertsons to the fire department, to speaking to the fire district and see if they, while they're waiting to figure out what their plans are with that piece of property, would be interested in teaming with the city in perhaps, a 3-foot fence around it. We would have to speak with Albertsons or whomever owns that shopping center to talk about parking, because that would be a little forward of us to assume we just use their parking. But that, I believe, might be a reasonable place for one as well. I don't know if anyone else has given this much thought. Has anyone else given this any thought and thought of a half acre? Mr. McCoy, would a half acre be big enough? I don't have a dog,
I think at this point, anything would be great, but I think a half acre might be a little small, but I think that Albertson's lot's probably all of an acre.
The Albertson's lot, how big is that, Ms. Erdman? Do you recall?
7 acres,
How many?
7.
7. Well, there's obvious enough there. And the one by the police department, you have an idea?
I don't, but I do know, and Mr. Kermit can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is under contract and has
Oh,
approval for development at this time.
okay. Well, then I didn't know that. Okay, cool. So perhaps then we talk to the fire department and see if we can team up with them while they try to just figure out where they're heading. And who knows, we may work with, is it TJ Shane that owns that? Is it TJ that owns that, family that owns that?
Which one's that?
Albertson's, the shopping center there?
Oh, that's Josh Oliver.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So did you have an idea, Mr. McCoy, of anywhere else? No.
No, I'm
Anything?
just passing on a lot of citizen comments is all.
Okay, and anything else, sir? I have for you a sidewalk on 20th and a dog park. There we are. Anyone else? Mr. Rogers, I believe I saw you next.
Yes, so in addition to these other ideas that have been mentioned, I am very interested in building an ADA accessible playground at one of our parks, and also adding the disc golf course either at the Gardner Oaks or somewhere else. I think both of these could be very popular and bring people into our community. For the ADA accessible park, I'm kind of thinking like a theme like the city of Vancouver did with their dinosaur park, like finding some way to do like safari animals or something where kids can learn while they're playing, and then also obviously be accessible to everyone who wants to play. And then the disc golf, I just feel like that one's a really inexpensive, easy way for us to have an activity to do in our city and also draw in tourism. They've got quite the following. People travel great distances to try different courses. So I think that could bring people into our city. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. A quick question while you're still on the line there, and Ms. Erdman. Ms. Erdman, if we look at the little mini park over there on 20th, the one that just has a jungle gym and the basketball, do we own all of that grass?
I'll have to look. I believe we do, but
Okay.
I have to check to make sure it's not with the HOA.
Because just thinking about maybe not the disc golf, way too small for that, but perhaps for her ADA park there, that might be perfect because there's parking there and it kind of rolls in down with the park on the left, Florence Robeson.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could kind of kill 2 parks in less than 200 yards, 300 yards. And plus give something to that neighborhood. McConnell's over there, I understand, but that's a pretty packed neighborhood. So that would open that up as well. Anyone else? Please speak up. I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Walters, I see you.
Yeah, okay. So I was a bit of an overachiever with ideas.
There you go.
I did also write down the sidewalks on the 20th Avenue.
Okay.
And the other thing was the holiday banner across Main Street, which seems to be a common theme every year around the holidays with the citizens. And then the third one is probably going to be a bit more complex. And I was kind of waiting to hear about the Durkee property and see if that was even an option, but maybe talks about building a sports complex.
Yes.
And this was something that we kind of discussed when we were talking about the YMCA issue. And so I'm just kind of wanting to bring that discussion back into some kind of action.
So when we something like Luke Jensen down in Hazeldale, I'll call it Hazeldale. It's probably not Hazeldale. Of course, now that would require a bond, as you know.
Correct.
So, okay. So, and then the banner, that's not probably too hard to come up with a few dollars from the couch cushion. Is it?
I think
Ms. Erdman?
we've already written it into the budget from
Did we?
last year. Yeah.
Did we? Oh, perfect. Then we don't have to worry about that. And then the 20th, yes, we'll work with Mr. Herzig and see if we can roll from there. Anything else? Nope. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Davis, I see you now.
I was kind of going on a different avenue as more of a community outreach, trying to make sure that not asking for too many funds, but I'd like to investigate. Someone has contacted me prior about more community events like the Harvest Day, the National Night Out, some things to bring everyone together. Harvest Day is extremely popular, especially after what we've been through with isolation. I think everybody is ready to get out, and how to go about it, I don't know, but I'd be willing to talk to Ms. Erdman and anybody else. But I think my big thing is bring the community together as much as we can, keep it the way it is, and without busting our budget anywhere. That's kind of where my mindset has been going. So that's it.
Anything else? Ms. Erdman, well, on that note, as you remember, what was it, 2019, 2018, we did movies at the community center, or was it always inside? We've never had one outside, I don't think.
It was inside because the cost of the outdoor licensing was quite a bit more than the indoor. So
that's correct.
Indoor, yeah.
Well, and of course you're going to speak with your folks in a couple of weeks. Maybe we speak with the folks at the parks to see if we still have the license.
It's funny you brought that up, Ms. Davis, because I actually met with park staff last week, and they have a whole host of ideas they want to run by you guys, that it's all more community involvement and participation. So, centered around different times of year. So that's definitely something that is on our radar screen as well. So we'll be bringing that forward.
Wonderful. Has anyone thought of anything else before we move on? And in my case, most everything was mentioned except for Ms. Erdman. I'm interested in pedestrian safety. In the past, it was Shane, what's the name of that group that paid for it?
Target Zero.
Thank you. I can't ever remember their name. Target Zero kicked in whatever the amount was to run that, which the last time I believe was 2017. And if they're unable, I'm sure we can probably find somewhere in the city's budget to collect a bit of funds to gather a few policemen and policewomen from across the North County to help us with that. I've picked up my walking considerably, and I have found that we're a city of unfriendly drivers to pedestrians. And so perhaps maybe they just need a little reminder from someone in a uniform that you need to be a little friendlier. And so Ms. Erdman, I saw wrote down everything. I too wrote down everything. I'm hoping, I really am, that between what the city comes up with and what we have, that by the end of 2 years, when we finish up in December, November of 23, that we can look back and say that we actually accomplished. If we get 2/3, it'll be a grand day. If we get half, it'll be a good day. So let's work towards this. And again, as time rolls on, we'll respect Mr. Bowman and his idea of we will have to find a way to pay for this. Nothing's going to drop in our laps. But I believe Mr. Rozier's ideas can be mostly done with grants and that kind of thing. So I think we can do it. Anyone else before we move on? Ms. Erdman? Yes, ma'am.
Just to kind of reiterate, I think we're on the right track for a lot of these. We're in the middle of our park plan update. A lot of this is centered around extracurricular activities, all things that are being looked at as part of that update. We're hoping to know what the needs and locations will be. So I think, within the next 2 years, we'll have a better idea and a better plan to make a lot of this feasible. And I will just reiterate too, that one of the things that staff has been talking about as a goal is also how to pay for our transportation infrastructure needs and looking at EV sales tax. So those are all things that we'll be talking about on the 28th as well. So it's actually encouraging to hear, because I think we're pretty well aligned on some of these ideas. So.
And can you make just a note, maybe in April, whatever days those are, that maybe one of the study sessions is kind of a breakdown on the TBD on just how that works. And so that it refreshes everyone's memory, and even those who haven't been with us before, it will give them an idea of what the thought is there.
For sure.
Okay,
Mr.
Yes,
Mayor,
sir.
I have a question. Ms. Erdman, when we, and this is to follow up with what Ms. Walters had asked about, when the Durkee property was turned over to the city, the question that has been brought up multiple times is what the intended use was for the Durkee property when they gave it to the county and then the county gave it to us, those type of things. I know at one point in time that Miss Hanson had a rough drawing of a sporting complex being put up there. I don't know if we have that, if it's down there somewhere. If not, I worked with Debbie on that before when I was with Little League, and then when I got onto council. Happy Valley, the city of Happy Valley in Oregon has a sporting complex that I think is what we kind of modeled it after. But there was a couple questions, and maybe you can follow up as we're going through this park stuff. Number one, can we bond something that is not in the city? Can we bond ball fields on city-owned property that's not in the city? Can we? What would it take to make a parks district that would include the county? Because that's the issue that we had when I was with Little League and we talked the Remy property. Was they got mad at Little League for not pushing that and passing ball fields in there. And in Little League, probably 30% of those kids actually lived in the city. The rest of them were coming in from the county. And one of the leagues that was using our fields was completely county. It was all East County. So can we do a district where we can partner with a taxing district that would include, those areas that would use that? So North County, maybe not so much Yackle, Amboy, that kind of stuff, because they have their own, but Hawkinson, that area that would be participating in using that. So because that may give us some other ways. And I know the county itself we can do some partnering with, but they're in worse shape than we are. If as far as money's concerned, they're trying to figure out where to build a jail. So, but as we're going forth with the parks, I think that would be good information to have.
Yeah, that's good to know. I'll have Kim pull all the files out of the community center, see if we can find those old drawings. I haven't seen them, but we'll definitely take a look.
And I think it was there were some issues of using it as a sporting complex and what it was intended for, that it may not necessarily line up, because we'd even talked to the mountain biking community of setting up mountain biking trails and stuff out through there, walking trails, those type of things when Mr. Williams was here. So
yeah, definitely, there's some covenants on the property that certain areas have to be preserved for open space and to maintain some habitat. It's also kind of loosely said that it can be used for any other open space and parks. So I feel like it could be a combination of both, but we'll definitely look into those covenants again. I have looked into the bonding issue again before. I'll refresh my notes on that too and bring that forward. And it's all part of what we're looking at as part of the parks plan. And also, so you guys are aware, I think we have Susan Tripp scheduled for the study session on February 7th to present her ideas for that property as well. So.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anytime. Anyone else? Hearing no one else, let's move on. Citizens communications, Ms. Kammer, was there any? Were there any? Excuse me.
No, sir.
Is there anyone online that has anything for the council that does not pertain to anything that's on the agenda? Hearing none there either, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Does any council member believe that any item needs to be withdrawn?
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Was there a second?
Second.
Oh, thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll consider it unanimous. Moving on, Ms. Erdman, I believe it's your turn now with the BG 503 street naming motion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Mr. Kermit has gone back, went through the resolution, worked with the developer, and has some new proposals for the naming of the street in the BG 503 project. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kermit.
Good evening, council and interested individuals. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, could you see that okay? I'll go ahead and refresh your memories on this, particularly for some of the new council members that weren't around in June. We've got a project in our city, Battleground 503. It has a diagonal street in it, and our city municipal code essentially says that in situations where our addressing officials don't want to designate that as a numerical street, which would be like an avenue or a street, kind of on the north-south grid, then they recommend a non-numerical name. And then that name needs to be chosen by council. This went before council on June 7th. The name that was thrown out there was Bluebird Drive. That name didn't get off the runway for different reasons. We did further research and looked into some past resolutions. And to kind of get down to the bottom line without getting into all of the details, the applicant came up with 3 names that felt like fit in with the resolution 907 as a rough framework. They listed Beechtold Avenue, Beseda Avenue, and Dixon Avenue. I just want to make one correction. These should not be termed avenues. They should be termed drives per our city code. So the council's choice is to either select one of these names, or if the council has another name in mind, the council can choose that as well. And let me know if you need me to share my screen again.
So again, it was Bechtold. Is that how it's pronounced?
I didn't confirm the pronunciation.
We'll use that for now.
Okay.
If that's okay with you. And then Beseda and Dixon.
Yeah.
7 months ago, as you know, we talked about this. Let's make a decision tonight so that Sam and the developers can move along. Mr. Bowman, yes, sir, I see you.
Mr. Mayor, were any of these names on the list of names that we had approved to begin with?
I can answer that.
Good.
The first 2, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. Dixon is the only name on resolution 0907. The applicant chose Beechtold or Beechtold and Beseda. I came back to them and said, at least get me something off of the resolution. And so they added Dixon.
Okay. Because I would rather stay with what was on the resolution personally.
So you're going
Dixon.
for Dixon Drive?
Yeah, if Dixon was the one that was on there, then that's the one that I think we should use.
Nope. Ms. Walters.
I also vote for Dixon.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
I agree with the Dixon Drive. It has a nice ring to it and it's easy to pronounce.
That matters. Ms. Davis.
I agree with Dixon, based on that it was part of the original and just the history behind it. It dates furthest back. It's got a lot of history for the city. So my vote is for the Dixon Drive.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, have a word?
I'm fine.
Miss Dixon's good for you. Wonderful. And Dixon is good for me as well. So are you, Sam, do you need something other than the 7 of us saying that Dixon Drive seems to be the name du jour?
Mr. Mayor, I believe we need a motion. I move the name to Diagonal Street in the Battleground 503 Project Dixon Drive.
Oh, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions before we move forward? Nope. Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. I believe that was 7-0, Mrs. Cammer. So Dixon Drive it is. Moving on. We're going now back to you, Ms. Erdman, for the Deacon Development Agreement proposal.
Yes, I will turn this over to Mr. Crummett as well. And I believe the developers are here this evening to present an idea for a project that is down on Main Street, zoned regional commercial. They would be looking to deviate from the existing zoning standards by allowing some residential on the ground floor. So I will turn it over to Mr. Crummett.
Good evening again, council. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Before you is a proposed development agreement. It's a term that many of you are quite familiar with. For those that aren't so familiar with it, developer agreement is allowed by state law. It's an agreement that is voluntary, voluntary contract between a local jurisdiction and a person who owns or controls property. It's an agreement where both parties enter into various obligations and they agree on certain standards for the development, and then it's binding after that. Practically speaking, when these typically come up is typically our development standards govern how development should go and be built or designed. However, in land development, there are complexities that come up that sometimes these complexities cannot be fully handled by the codes in place. And so those are occasions where development agreement is used. In this case, we have primarily a commercial project or a mixed use project that would like to be located here along Main Street, just east of the Battleground Inn. And the proposal essentially is to have primarily commercial development along Main Street with the opportunity to have some residential units on the south end of the site. The entire site is designated as commercial. Under our city's commercial standards, the commercial standards do not allow for ground floor residential. So kind of the crux of this agreement would be to allow for some ground floor residential on the south end of the site, with kind of the benefit of having some design that goes beyond our typical city standards, things like a park and a pedestrian plaza. I've worked with Deacon Development on some of these ideas. We kind of brainstormed at the beginning of how they might move their project forward. We looked at A, they could request a zone change, B, they could try to change our code legislatively. Then the third option was to kind of float the idea of a development agreement for council. I think we thought that a development agreement might be the best, at least, option to pursue. So this evening, the request is to allow for the developer to proceed with drafting a development agreement. It's not a decision itself on the agreement of all. It's just to give the developer some assurance to move forward without any obligations either way on the outcome. So I'll turn it over to the applicant. I've been working primarily with Pete Snook, and he's also got some of his team members with him.
Sam, but before we hear from Pete, I'm sorry, Pete, we just met, but if you don't mind me calling you Pete, Mr. Rogers has a question.
Oops, I just turned my camera off, trying to unmute. So I just had a quick question as to why we don't allow residential on commercial, under commercial. Like, what's the reason behind that?
The primary reason is we want our commercial districts to be primarily for commercial land uses, and we want that, you know, storefront experience. When people come to our commercial districts, we want those ground level storefronts to be commercial use. So that's the primary reason.
And for this project, is it beneficial to have the residential in the back, because that's not really going to be seen, you know, it's not going to be a popular commercial space?
I think that's part of it. The developer could probably talk to that, but
okay.
The further you get away from Main Street, the harder it is to make commercial work.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Snook, please, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pete Snook. I'm the development director at Deacon, and I appreciate the late nights you guys put in for this kind of thing. I'm not going to take very much time because I'd like to leave room for you to see the project. That's more interesting than us, but there's a little bit of background. I want to tell you who we have with me tonight. I've got Steve Deacon. He's the president of Deacon Development. Myself, Ian Llewellyn may be listening in. He's the finance manager. Spencer Anderson with LSW Architects out of Vancouver. And Chris Green, who's a senior land planner at Harper Hoff in Portland. So with that team, I think we should be able to address any questions that come up. We got people from each spot. Deacon, the company, was formed more than 40 years ago as a general contractor and has built literally hundreds of grocery stores. And I tell people if they want to get some scale of the bigger things, they built the IKEA store at the airport and the Woodburn factory outlet stores. Then they have done smaller projects that we get down to, you know, a Mud Bay pet store. The Deacon Development was founded about 15 years ago to build projects and develop them from the ground up and remodel tired retail projects as well. And we've, in that time, we've done mostly retail and multifamily residential, but we've also done medical and pretty much everything except industrial properties. The project that we're going to propose tonight is right in what we would call the sweet spot for our group. I mean, it has everything in it. And to add to what was said by Sam about the project, we're actually putting a substantial amount of retail up on the street. So the total amount of retail in the project is almost equal by accident to what it would be if it was all under the buildings. So we're not eliminating any retail square footage out of the project. But I want you to understand that we're showing it to you tonight, and because it's going to take some effort between the two of us, and we really appreciate and want your help. With all that I've said as quickly as I can, because I want to get as much time in for the project, I want to turn it over to Spencer, because he has a slide presentation and he worked on the design and has the most knowledge about it. And so unless you have some question now, I don't want to have to interrupt Spencer. We'll get him on board.
I don't see any Mr. Snook, so we'll just continue with Spencer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I'm going to share my screen at the moment. Hopefully everybody can see this slideshow. Fantastic. Right, so thanks, Pete. Again, my name is Spencer Anderson from LSW Architects down in Vancouver, Washington, with the partnership with Deacon Development and HHPR from our planning team. So there are a few discussion points that I wanted to introduce, just kind of going through this proposal and this slideshow to really bring out how we're planning the site and really trying to create this catalyst for this kind of tricky landlocked site. So a few discussion points on how to activate the site for both commercial and residential, how it would support Battleground's 50-year vision, and how the city of Battleground can create active neighborhoods to reduce sprawl and encourage the economic development. So this next slide essentially shows the proposed layout of the residential and commercial communities within our site. As Sam essentially introduced earlier, we have an L-shaped site. As you're seeing here, north is to the left of the page, fronting West Main Street, and the right of the page is south down the site. So in between Southwest 15th Avenue and West Main Street. So with a mostly landlocked site, we had to expand on some creative thinking on how to plan a mixed-use project that both offers personal and communal elements while activating the street frontage of West Main Street, given the narrow north side of our site. So utilizing the space closest to West Main Street, you can see we intended to activate the street frontage with various commercial spaces, offering ease of use, travel, visibility, and plenty of parking within those buildings north of the Southwest First Way extension. These are also adjacent to the existing inn and will have the most visibility on site. The extension of Southwest First Way acts as a perceived break in the length of the site and also introduces a main crossing and node between the residential buildings that you see to the south of Southwest First Way, as well as the commercial spaces to the north. Right down the middle, as you can see, there's a pedestrian and vehicular corridor that links the three residential buildings, drawing users from the activated commercial spaces to the north, down that vehicular boulevard to the south, to a community park at the south portion of the site. Here's a visualization and just an illustration of that crux between the pedestrian boulevard, the Southwest First Way extension, looking down through those residential buildings. As you can see, following the Southwest First Way extension, we do have some commercial storefront fronting that extension. And as you look further down the street, that's where we're proposing ground floor residential units with activated street-friendly stoops as private outdoor spaces for the residents. And then further down, looking towards the third residential building towards the park. The second visualization kind of shows the character of what the commercial spaces would be fronting Main Street, where, as described, you would get a ground floor storefront experience with more modern design. This site diagram just starts to explain activating the site for both residential and commercial experiences. So this is where we decided to pursue a horizontal mixed use layout for the site, providing commercial along West Main Street, residential really focusing on what is active, what is a little bit more geared towards the surroundings of the site and how we can play upon what is already existing. So multifamily townhomes to the south that are currently under construction, existing single family and multifamily to the southwest, and then high visibility towards Main Street to the north. And in doing this, shifting the commercial space, we're able to provide additional ground floor units on the ground floor of these residential buildings. As you can see on the left of these plans, we have that delegated retail space, but the rest facing the pedestrian vehicular boulevard would be ground floor residential stoops highlighted in yellow. So still activating that boulevard, but creating an elevated private outdoor space for these residents. And also satisfying the current need of housing in the area and the future need of it. And for the third point, creating active neighborhoods and reducing sprawl and encouraging economic development. So this is where we had the idea of the multi-purpose boulevard kind of running down the center of the site. So, creating basically a gathering place in the heart of the site for, multiple modes of transportations, cars, bicyclists, pedestrians, circling through the site, a public plaza in front of one of the retail buildings for possibly small activities or places to really sit and gather and create an outdoor experience that everybody can enjoy while moving down that pedestrian boulevard and being linked to the rest of the amenities on the site. There are a few challenges for this project. As you can read, it's an innovative project with a lot of features of community benefits, but it's also a time of rapidly increasing construction costs on a site that can be a catalyst for further development and where foundational public infrastructure still needs to be built. And as Sam mentioned, we are pursuing the solution of a development agreement to provide design flexibility to meet the goals of a comprehensive plan and community vision for this West Main district, and also providing long-term certainty for both the developer and the city on design features, quality, and financial performance of the project. So next step, asking the applicant requests City Council consider entering into a development agreement and establishing a successful partnership with this West Main Commons project for the future of the West Main District. So that is the end of the slideshow, and the development team, myself, Chris, we would love to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Very informative. Okay, folks, who has a question or two for these folks? Mr. Bowman, sir. I see you, Ms. Walters. You'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I don't know if this is the best night to come, and after we just went through the Washington City's Insurance Authority telling us the do's and don'ts and how they hate developers agreements. But the question I have, and maybe this is to Sam, how many developers agreements do we actively have right now in the city? I know we have one with TJ Fontenette still. We have the one that we just signed or we approved for the village, correct?
Well, that's in process.
In process that we've authorized, right? To move forward. It's for you guys to work through it, right?
We have authorized negotiation on that, which is actively occurring, but the DA itself hasn't been reviewed by council.
Yes. The village itself was a developer's agreement, correct?
And that's expired, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question is are we ever going to look at this from a standpoint of getting to the point where we don't have to have developers agreements? Because until tonight, I mean, I still don't have, I don't want you guys to think that I have an issue with developers agreements, but it wasn't until tonight that I realized, and I knew this, it just was reiterated tonight because when he said, when our Washington City's gentleman said that a developer agreement is binding future councils. And we saw that in the developers agreement that we had in the village. We've seen that in the developers agreement that we've had with TJ and the Walmart area. Now, I don't think this one is quite to the scale of that. And I do like what they've laid out there, but is there other ways to do it besides just doing developers agreements that could change where our zoning is commercial within, so many feet of Main Street, whatever that is, and then from there it goes into, I don't know, where we allow the apartments, or the multifamily. What is that a zoning issue that we need to look at and read?
There's a couple ways we could look at it. First of all, I don't see development agreements as kind of bad things in general. I think you have to look at the components of a development agreement and maybe what parts were bad or what parts you disagreed with in a past decision. So I think it's fair to say each should stand on its own. And I think you're also correct that if we keep getting a development agreement, is that if they keep going after the same thing, for example, negotiating a road through a wetland or bumping up against some of our design standards, I think that does tell us maybe we need to relook at our design standards. Instead of seeing that as, I see it as a learning opportunity, because we might get a project through a development agreement that is above city standards, and we say, we really like this project, let's redesign our design guidelines that maybe model off of this project. So I think it can go, these can go in different ways. And I think it just takes negotiating well and looking at these thoroughly when you get into them. So a future council doesn't have big regrets, 5 or 10 years later.
And I mean, I don't see in just looking at this right now, I don't see a lot of regrets that could, that we would go, oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It kind of fits with that area. There are a couple questions I do have though. I don't know if this is to you, Mr. Crummett, or if this would be to Mark, but can 15th handle the traffic that would be generated there? Because that's got quite a bit of traffic as it is right now. How close are we to having a failing intersection at 15th heading northbound from the apartments that are already there, Ace Hardware, those businesses that would funnel out onto 15th? Because we only have, I think we have a left turn lane there and a through lane that is through, or a right turn lane to head east, if I'm correct. I may be wrong. Shauna, you live over there, I think, don't you? Am I correct there? So how close are we to having a failing intersection there now?
So at least with the recent traffic studies, we're not at failure, and I don't believe we're close. And then we're doing the project with the Connect Washington money it'll mostly increase the capacity going southbound, from the north leg, but increasing any capacity at an intersection increases the overall capacity, because, that's how we look at level of service. They obviously haven't done a traffic study yet for this project, so that will be something they'll have to do and address that issue. But from what I've seen from recent studies, there's not an issue at this point that we're aware of.
Okay, because that's, and Ms. Erdman, this comes back to you. The reason I'm saying this is because for this, I'm in my 11th year, and I've asked for 10 years now to look at the development standards that we have, as far as the what do we call the Lake Oswego model that we're running on?
The legacy standards.
The legacy standards, right? Because that intersection is a good example of, if we needed to put in an additional lane there, there's no room for an additional lane because we're tearing out sidewalk and buying out buildings. And that building that is there is connected to a hotel that is built on top of it. So these legacy standards are driving me nuts, because we're really narrowing down what we can do in an area. And I look at this proposal that they just showed. It's a beautiful setup, and it's exactly what we have in our standards, is put your commercial right out on the street So if we ever needed to do anything more to 502, we're ripping out buildings and instead of parking lot. And so it looks good, but on 15th, there's a lot of stuff going in down there. We've got those new townhomes that have went in down there. We've got apartments that have went in down there. VCA went in down there. Now this, and that street's basically built out as far as it can be built out before it gets really, really, really expensive for us to deal with. Now, they can go out through their development and head eastbound on 502. But if they're wanting to go westbound on 502, they have to go out through 15th. So it'll be interesting to see how this traffic study comes. But I don't have a problem with this. I think it's a good setup. I guess the one question I do have, and I don't know if you can answer it yet, anyone, how many units are you guys planning to put in there? I saw that one said it was 4 stories, and I think that would be the largest as far as size wise apartment complex we have in the city. I don't think we have any over 3. So how many units are being planned to be built in there for single family units or multifamily? I'm sorry.
This is Pete, if I might answer. We're planning right now approximately 180 units to be added. We've spent a little time with the traffic engineering firm Kittleson Traffic. I think they do work for the city, and he has they won't give you an answer because then they might not get paid. But they were recognizing that well, I need to back up here for a second. So the property in the L wing is actually owned by Fred Meyer and not a part of our application. What is happening, and the reason they're on there, is because we've talked with them and come to agreement. We're going to writing to share that right in, right out, so that we don't put another access into the street at the same, just a block closer. And so I think that's good for them and us. In return for that, we're going to take some of their traffic out through First Street, and they'll let some of our traffic go out past them and out on 12th Street. So we're taking as much congestion off of 15th as possible. But I do think that it will prove out in a traffic study that we're not going to create a huge problem. And if you are a retail and residential developer, the last thing you want to do is build a property nobody can get access to. So we're on the same page there. We'll work with the staff and make sure we get the information we need to do it correctly. The second thing I wanted to mention was that Chris Green with Harper spent quite a bit of time reviewing some of the work that you've already done. And Chris, correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but you had a housing plan that was put together.
Housing action plan.
Housing action plan, thank you. And in that, and so we have adopted most of the changes here around that housing action plan. And there's comment in there about changing this exact circumstance where 100% of the ground floor has to be retail. And this is also kind of a special circumstance because the back part of this property is landlocked. So the only way to get through it is through the front. And it just, if you can picture having to have retail on the backside of those buildings that have no access except to park your car, walk around in the back. I mean, I'm very pleased with the staff that they recognize right away that we don't want to create something that won't be the bank alone at some point in time and is going to be harmful to the smaller businesses. So that's kind of what's driving this request. And I don't think it is something that your city hasn't already begun thinking about.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I agree with you. I think we have a piece of commercial property in the city that's a beautiful building that sits in the village and for 12 years plus has been vacant. And so, that's not good for us. It's not good for whoever developed it or whoever owns it. So I agree with you there. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Walters, please.
Good evening. I have a whole bunch of questions. I'm sorry, just bear with me. So one of them is the pricing for the apartments. Is that is there going to be an affordable component to that? I know that one of the things that you guys mentioned was the cost of construction for these buildings. My concern is that this is along a bus line, and we would want to see more affordable type housing in that area so that people can access the bus line. Can anybody answer?
All right,
whether-
sorry. I thought you were going to go through the list, but that this is good.
Okay.
So
You wanna
that's a very difficult question to ask this early in the project.
Sure.
I'm going to say that they're going to be working apartments. This isn't either really high-end finishes or low-end finishes. It's part of the thing that's out of our control right now. It's with the cost of doing these. You just heard your sidewalk went from 500,000 to 750. This building's doing the same thing as we speak, so we're trying to hurry along and see if we can't get there. I don't believe it's going to be able to have what would be the legal term of affordable housing, where the rates are reduced and paid for by a government or private investment. But I do want to leave you with the fact that we can't charge more than the market will bear. So one of the things that, again, we have to do is be able to pay this is going to be a multi-million-dollar mortgage here. And so we have to offer these to the community at a rate that's comparable to the other spaces that are available in the community. Because it's going to be expensive and all brand new, that's probably going to work on a little bit of a hardship on us, but we believe in the future of Battleground and this particular site in particular. And so a little thinner margin at the start may be our only solution wherever we build for the near future. But we're not intending to put up a building where everything's really fancy and very expensive. That's not our intention.
My next question is, will you be building anything beyond 2-bedroom apartments?
You know, that's a question. Spencer, did we design any 3 bedrooms in this project?
Yeah, so the unit mix that we were going off of to get that approximate 180 units was between 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms.
Okay. The reason I have that question is that there are not very many 3-bedroom apartments in our city. We have a lot of studio 1, 2, and but no 3s. So there are a lot of people who are deciding to work from home now and needing that extra space. So, and then the ground floor apartments, are they going to be ADA accessible?
All ground floor apartments, all apartments will be accessible from the interior of the building. I think depending on how the site grades out through the length of the street, we may be able to have just a standard path to your patio door that would be accessible based on the length of the street or the grades. You might have to introduce a couple stoop steps to be able to get up to the grade. But all apartments will be accessible from the main entry of the building. And there will be by the IBC and Washington State Code, a certain percentage of these have to be to a accessible level that everybody can reach.
Okay. And my last question is, it doesn't sound like it, and it doesn't look like it from the drawings that you sent, but there is that development on Southwest 5th Avenue with the townhouses. Would you be able to perhaps lengthen the street and make an opening for those streets to connect?
Maybe you could rephrase that for me so that I.
Okay, if you look at the map, there's the Southwest 5th that has all the townhouses that are newly built along there.
Yes.
that is an unfinished street that will eventually connect all the way out to past Walmart and Eaton
Oh, yes.
Boulevard, all of
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Is there any way to open up that south side of your property to put a road in that would connect to that? I'm thinking that may be something that could, I don't know how close they are. It looked like they were just
Mr.
about
Anderson,
touching.
would you pull up that picture for us, please? If possible.
Yeah, I believe the two properties share that property line, but Southwest Fifth is quite a ways south of our property. If I'm correct.
Oh,
So
And
Mr.
so-
Walters, if we look at the very back on the right-hand side, you're thinking Southwest Fifth runs parallel to the back
Yes.
of their property?
yes.
Yeah, it does, but there's a row of homes in between. And I believe it's planned on your traffic plan to go through at some point in time to 12th, and then 12th goes down to Walmart. So like as first will go through and fifth will go through, but we'll need the people at the top of the screen there to develop their property then.
I'm just wondering if there isn't an outlet, a second outlet that could be built there. Even if it were to go into Southwest 15th, so that there could be two entrances. I'm thinking of the emergency entrances and the emergency vehicles that may need to come in to the area. I just would hate to see just one way in and one way out.
I believe, if you give me just a moment.
Yeah, I'm looking on maps online right now, and there is a row of homes in between this property line and the planned Fifth Street.
But could they come forward to 15th is what I'm asking. Could there be, I don't know. It doesn't look like maybe there is any space for that to happen, but.
Well, Fifth Street does touch 15.
Right, but you have no outlet in your design plan to allow traffic to come out that way.
Correct. Just First Street into 15. And eventually, you know, I mean, the plan for this area, if you've seen it, is Third Street comes across, First comes across, and Fifth comes across, and all tie into 12th. But there's, you know, one huge wetland down there somewhere that is going to delay that process for quite some time. And then there's the property adjacent to us, the owner's in California, and I don't know what his long-term plans are. So, and then there's the property that's owned by the hotel that's between us and 15th. So we can't, the city already pre-arranged for the hotel to let us cross it first and us to cross across to pick up those other businesses on its way to 12th. So I think your goal is going to be attained, but not in the timing of this project.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Anyone else, please speak up. Mr.
Mr.
Cortez. Yes, sir, I see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the applicant for coming tonight and presenting. It was a good presentation. Thank you very much for that. I like what was presented tonight, especially looks like there's going to be about a third of an acre dedicated to parks, roughly, give or take. And I like where it's located in the back of the project, away from the traffic and everything like that. So that's going to be great for children that are located in that project. And then I think it's a good mix of both retail as well as multifamily that goes along with even the existing townhomes and single family residents that are already there in the back right now. So I think it fits good in that area. The applicant is well known for good projects in our region. And so Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize council to work with the applicant on a developer's agreement and then come back to us for a vote. So that is my motion.
Yes, sir, I hear you. Can I move through for further questions? Or let me just see if there's a second and then we'll move through for further questions.
I would second that, Mr. Mayor, but is that, Mr. Cortez, is that to authorize council or to authorize staff?
Did I say council?
Yes, you did.
Okay, to authorize staff. My apologies.
Okay,
I'll second that. Mayor.
so there's a motion and a second, but let's continue with questions. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Cortez?
No, that is it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, thank you. Mr. McCoy, sir.
Yeah, I was hoping you could clear up. I don't know if you can still share your screen, but on the, Mr. Anderson, but on the discussion point slide, and it looks like a beautiful project. And you mentioned, yeah, exactly. So from how I understand your concept, that corner is the only retail and those other windowed are not. Do I read? Because it seems like I'm seeing kind of both sides. I'm seeing like people out eating, but then I don't see where that fits in except for that one particular space. And then, I mean, it doesn't kind of, I'm trying to understand the pedestrian vehicular boulevard if you just have one retail there, I guess.
Okay, so what we are trying to do is on First Street is create a retail environment that looks pretty traditional on the north side of First Street. As you cross over, and then that creates the main entrances where that viewpoint is from when you drive onto the property initially from First Street. If you look to your right, that's what you're looking at. We are keeping a retail component right on First Street because we believe that there will be enough traffic there to be able to facilitate a daycare or something like that that isn't direct traffic related retail. And then as you move further into the site, we're keeping that feel by maintaining glass. So like the community room, a fitness room, those kinds of activities will also kind of activate the street. And then as you get a little deeper into the project, we're still trying to let some of the apartments access out onto the street there through those stoops, as they're called, that are elevated to keep them a little bit private. And so that's, and then the one in the back will be more traditional where you'd have retail, no retail component at all. So when if you were in that viewpoint and you're looking to your right, yes, you see a couple of small retail, and then further down, that's actually residential uses. If you look to your left, it would be all retail. Then we don't have that viewpoint. LSW charges too much for their drawings. I just thought that was a good time to get that in.
Yeah, that explains it for me. And then I also had a question just to get back to Councilmember Bowman's point about the zoning. Is the zoning of this commercial go far south because the depth of the lot is so big? In other words, I didn't pull up the zoning map in my bad, but I just had the thought when Councilmember Bowman brought it up. Essentially, is south of Southwest First Street, if that was a separate lot, would that be zoned commercial?
It is currently, yes, zone commercial.
Mm-hmm. But it's all one lot, so I'm wondering.
Yes, you're correct. We usually follow the lot line. So if there were additional smaller lots in there, we could have potentially looked at those being residential at the time. But we typically follow the lot line so that we don't have split zoned lots.
Understand. So, I mean, I think that the farther south apartment, it doesn't make no sense to have any commercial in there at all. I wonder if maybe wrapping that commercial around that front might potentially have some benefit, but I'm not a developer, so I'll leave that to you guys.
Well, we have that same concern. And so our main idea is to keep the appearance be the same. Try to get, there's believe it or not, there's very little difference in value, rental income or property value, whether it's small retail or residential. So we don't have a preference. We'll get our real estate brokers involved and start getting information back on how valuable that is and what size it should be.
So would it be accurate to say that essentially you're going to assess demand and look to see if wrapping around and making those front two buildings more commercial would be something possible and within your scope?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yes. Anyone else? Ms. Davis? No? You're good? Perfect. Well, let me, if I may, ask a few questions, gentlemen. Will it be a natural gas supplied complex? Have you gotten that far?
We haven't, but we generally have natural gas.
I don't care one way or the other. I'm just trying to figure out if it will be, if you'll offer it.
If it's available, we'll always offer it. Yes.
Okay. Sam, we've been talking for the last year or two about live, work, and play, excuse me. This obviously fits that criteria. Is that correct? Kinda.
Sorry about that. No, I think the advantage of this project, it does seem to get back closer to our comprehensive plan and specifically our livability chapter, as well as our vision. And you could compare that with, for example, like the Mill Creek Town Center, the Walmart Shopping Center. I mean, that's strictly commercial. I guess I should say there are apartments in there, but it's more of kind of an auto-oriented place. You really need a car to get around there. I think this is more compact, and yeah, you would have a park, you'd have the kind of more of an inviting environment.
Thank you. Well, since you're here, which of these streets will be city streets and which will be private? Will Southwest First Way become a private street, or will it become a city street for our maintenance?
First Street will be public.
First Way, excuse me, First Way.
I don't know about First Way. We need to kind of look into the merits of that. If it's not going to go anywhere, it very well may be private.
Okay, and then First Street, that will be there because I don't see an entrance on the First Street from a public street. Have I got that right?
I want to make sure we've got our terminology correct.
I guess my concern is what will be private streets, what will be city streets?
The east-west street that goes through is going to be public because that's going to continue through the site. And that's currently called First Way. Sorry.
Yes. So that's going to be a public street.
That'll be public. And then the north-south street, I deferred to our city engineer, public works director on that, and what we need to assess that one at.
Yeah, from what I can see on the map, First Way should be the only public street. Everything else should be able to be private.
Okay. And so, and again, as you gentlemen probably know, this is not, the seven of us, this is not our business. So if this sounds kind of silly, so be it. Is this an HOA type deal where they're responsible for everything in there?
Wow, that's a good question. I live in a condo, so I'm very familiar with HOAs. And so the residential portion is not an HOA. Their rent is all inclusive of the maintenance and everything for their property. The commercial tenants generally pay their rent plus a share of the upkeep. It's not really an HOA, it's additional rent, but it operates very similar to an HOA.
My only concern, sir, is that no one comes knocking on our door looking for $1 or $2. So as far as the renters and the apartment people and all that, my concern is that we're responsible for Southwest First Way, and you guys would be responsible, along with Fred Meyer, for everything else inside the development.
Oh, I understand your question.
Have I got that down?
Yeah, for the long term. And then we bill you every 5 years for the total. No,
Yeah, that's
that's humor.
text and mail.
I saw your eyes get large. No, you're correct. That's our intent. You would be
And then
maintaining the First Avenue. We're maintaining the park.
Okay, cool. And so my only other thing, and Ms. Erdman and Mark, this concerns me. If there are 180 units in there, that means between the hours of 6:30 a.m. till 8 o'clock, there's a possibility of 270 to 360 cars splitting the scene and the same in the afternoon coming back home. I call them the red ants marching into the night or into the morning. Main Street at that point, I cannot imagine 270 cars, 1.5 per unit, taking that kind of load. Am I not seeing something? We're already backed up considerably now. If we add that, plus during the day, not so much, it would be in and out, I get that. But those couple of AM and PM type times, I would be concerned that the flood would just be outrageous.
Yeah, and again, it's something we'll have to check with a traffic study. You'd be amazed how much traffic a road can actually handle. It's, what you have to tell people is it's not going to be perfect. That's not what our standard is. Our standard is, level of service D and E, depending on signalization. And during those peak times, that's not perfect. It's not horrible, but it's not perfect either. And so as long as they can meet that standard, they're good to go.
Okay, and then with the modernization of the intersection, there'll be a right going south, right there on the highway. Is there a right turn lane coming in there going south?
It's a dual left turn going southbound, so on the north leg, and I believe a right and a through going southbound. So there'll be essentially 3 lanes going southbound there, 2 for left and then 1 shared and through, or right and through.
Right. Okay. So it will kind of clean that up just a tad, giving folks the opportunity to make a right on red and try to keep things moving.
Yeah, and again, most of that's from Fred Meyers. That's where the biggest issue is. So improving that will improves the overall flow of the intersection.
Okie dokie. Okay, there's a motion on the floor. There is a second. Are there any further questions before we take a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll consider it unanimous. It was a pleasure to meet you fellows, and we look forward to what you're bringing in the future.
Yes, thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Erdman, we're moving on and going to the administrative reports.
No administrative reports this evening.
Okie dokie. And we're moving on from there to the council communications. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring before the council?
I would.
Yes, ma'am. I can see you now. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Davis.
I just want to let everybody know that last Thursday, I had the opportunity to go on a ride along with the Battleground Police Department. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my driver was Officer Chris, I don't want to screw it up, but Gadwan. And then the other officers, Luke James and Ashley Kinlaw, Michelle Fox, Sergeant Knuth, were courteous, kind, informative, and they worked extremely well together. It was a pleasure to meet them and to see how hard they work and how smoothly they work. I let Chief Fort know how wonderful his crew is. Of course, he already knows that. But I just want to thank the opportunity to do that, and just how I'm just even more proud of our police department and all that they do for us. So thank you.
Wonderful. Did they let you ride in the front? Because the last time I went, they made me ride in the back. It was a little,
Oh,
yeah, it was uncomfortable back there, but I got used to it.
No, they let me right up front this time.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Anyone else? Seeing none, I don't think so. Yes, there we are. Then we're moving on to an executive session. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.110G, the city council will enter an executive session to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee for approximately 30 minutes with no action to follow. May I get a motion on that?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. So Ms. Erdman, this is how we're getting in there.
Yes, you just hit the join button and it will take you straight to the room.
How easy is that?
Yeah.
Wow. See you there. Okay, so we're waiting on Mr. Bowman and Ms. Davis. And Ms. Hayes.
I bet they left the whole meeting.
Probably.
And Ms. Cameron left the meeting. We don't need Ms. Cameron though, do we?
No, she's Battleground City Clerk.
I don't see her.
I shouldn't have given Shane my idea.
She's here. She's here.
She's here.
Oh, okay.
We had to work through leaving the breakout room. We got it though.
Gosh, I felt like Philip for a minute.
Oh, I know. That's right. Make fun of the old guy.
Well, I was trying to, if you go
Technology.
here.
At some point, you'll be older.
She figured it out. She swiped.
You'll be 62 one day, and your daughter will be what, 12?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
She
one
can
day I
drive you-
will.
She'll drive you to the Social Security office. What a sweetheart.
You better hope I make it that long. She's about to kill me herself.
When's her birthday, Shane? When does she turn 2? Soon.
February 13th, the day before
February 13th.
Valentine's.
That's right. Because I know ours are, just about 2 months apart, almost exactly.
Yeah. See, I was smart. That's the day that I picked for her to be induced. My wife didn't like it because it's too close to Valentine's. And I'm like, do you want her husband to remember when her birthday is? You do it right next to Valentine's.
Good looking out for that future.
Yeah, what forethought that was.
I know. Plus, he only has to buy one gift.
No, that's bad advice. That's bad.
What did you have for dinner yesterday?
What did I have?
If you can think that far ahead, certainly you can tell us what you had for dinner last night.
No.
That's what I thought.
No.
Well, while we're killing 2 minutes, if you'll kind of pull the camera down and let's see your shirt, Shane. If you're interested in these, who's responsible for these now, Ms. Erdman?
I can have tomorrow put together some options for you guys for shirts if you'd like to do that.
If you're interested in that, there in the past we used some money that was drawn from us way back when and bought everyone a golf shirt and a t-shirt. And then Shane, I believe you bought that on your own.
Yes.
Yes. So
I think last year we had different things, like you could get a coat or you could get.
Yeah, we pulled together a few things, some sweaters and stuff for the ladies and a few polo shirts for the guys. And then also, if you guys have anything else that you would like to have embroidered, you're welcome to bring us your shirts and we can take those in and have them embroidered as well. But I'll definitely have tomorrow put together another package for you for 20.
yes, please. And if anyone's interested in that, we can square that away.
Cool.
Okie dokie. It is 21:19:20. So we'll wait 40 seconds and then we'll roll. Certainly want Mr. McCoy to get all the sleep he can stomach.
Amazon, what about me?
Well, I wasn't going to speak of you, but a man his age, fast approaching my age, needs his sleep.
4 a.m. and council meetings kind of kicking my rear.
You need to find a better job. Tell it to your preacher. Okay, it is. The next meeting date is February 7th, 2022. The meeting begins 7 p.m. There is no study session, Ms. Erdman?
There potentially will be. I'm waiting for confirmation from Ms. Tripp.
Oh, that's right. So we'll let you know. And so we'll see you then. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.